Hello and welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. It's always a delight to have you join us on Insight.
We will on this episode shed some light on the recent United Nations approval for the extension of Nigeria's exclusive economic zone, otherwise known as the EEZ. That extension clearly does have broad implications for several sectors here in Nigeria, as it means Nigeria now has jurisdiction over a larger maritime area internationally. Also on this episode, we will be talking about the gains being made in the handling of NTD or NTDs in Nigeria. Better still, I'll just say neglected tropical diseases and also what remains. Elizabeth, what will you be talking about?
Still on our plate is budget implementation, and CSOs are worried about our implementation. So we will examine mechanisms to be adopted by CSOs for full implementation of the budget for the good of Nigerians.
Very well then. We would begin our discussion when we return. I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
And applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Let me begin by making it clear that the UN approval for the EEZ extension now allows Nigeria to redraw the territorial map of its sovereignty in the Gulf of Guinea. What that means is that Nigeria now has the right to exploit the abundant carbon and marine resources in the area. There's absolutely no doubt that the country stands to gain broadly from, this extension. Yet there might be some geopolitical dynamics to contend with in the region. We will be discussing some of these implications with my guest, Paul Alaje, Chief Economist, SPM Professionals, who incidentally is also a finance and development expert and a serial entrepreneur. Welcome to Insight, Paul. Glad to have you join us here on the program.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me.
Paul, just allow me, just before we begin our conversation, allow me quickly get something out of the way, and especially for viewers who do not understand what we mean by the EEZs. Well, an exclusive economic zone is a concept established at the United Nations Conference on the Law of the Seas, and that was in 1982. It says that a coastal state has authority over the exploration and exploitation of marine resources in its neighboring parts of the continental shelf. Continental shelf has this measurement, but then for the EEZ, it is generally about 200 nautical miles, but now ours has been extended from 200 nautical miles to 220, if I'm not mistaken. But then the general rule is to have it between 200 and 230 of nautical miles beyond a nation's territorial seas. Paul, as you know, Nigeria's EEZ has been extended now, like I said, from 200 to 220 nautical miles. Why is that necessarily, if it is, a big win to the government and people of Nigeria, especially maybe when you consider the launching of the blue economy and creation of the Ministry for Marine and Blue Economy?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Let me start by saying congratulations to Nigeria and also to our leaders, especially those that initiated this move.
Professor Awoshika, let's not forget him.
Professor Awoshika, I must say congratulations to him because he shows the art of being patriotic. He's a patriotic Nigerian.
Indeed.
And he has seen the need for Nigeria exclusive economic zone to be expanded. A number of things will happen within the Gulf of Guinea. The first for Nigeria is what happened around the maritime, which of course includes our ability to have exclusive right for baiting of sheep around that area, fishing.
Sure.
And more importantly, our continuous interest in searching for more oil within the area. And it's not limited to this. The opportunities within this area are in leaps and bounds. They are huge. You might want to consider it just as a little extension, but little extension make the difference. Recall what happened to to Cross River, when part of that area was exceeded to Cameroon because of some agreement and settlement that happened at the international level. The truth is, this will give more revenue to Nigerian government. If we are serious about it, after this approval, this will also boost economic engagement by Nigeria, revenue to government, boost our GDP expectedly. Our projection, our organization, when we got this report, is that government needs to start immediate engagement of the area, because if you get an approval and you don't engage, then the water area is fallow. The good news is that Nigeria now has it. What we need to do should be the next concern. How do we begin to engage? How do we begin? Even if the area has some island, I don't know, but we can develop something that can also help us boost tourism around the area if that is possible. But the coincidence here is that President Tinubu has just created a ministry, Marine and Blue Ocean Economy. What a time this alignment is happening. I am only very hopeful that the Minister Oyetola will look beyond the traditional way of making money for government and also doing business within the maritime area and look at how we can make more in terms of revenue. Already, that ministry have capacity of generating about 2 to 4 trillion naira within the next 2 years. With this new addition, how do we boost revenue? How do we boost marine contribution to the GDP of Nigeria? So, truthfully, there are a lot of benefit that comes with it. But that does not mean it does not come with some demerit. But maybe as the program continues,
of course,
we can look at the challenges.
I mean, I must agree with you. The benefits they abound in leaps and bounds, like you've said. And when you mentioned oil and gas, it spiked my interest. So I would like for us to focus a bit on oil and gas exploration and the opportunities these extension portend, for us in that area, because it doesn't look, or rather, it does look like oil and gas would increasingly dominate our blue economy for the foreseeable future. Do you remember one projection by regulators, Paul? I don't know if you remember that Nigeria's oil reserve is likely to last just about another 50 years. If you had that, I mean, to the divestment trend where major oil companies are selling their assets to local companies, how can we favorably flip the EEZ extension for Nigeria's oil and gas sector even now as the world looks forward and towards cleaner energy?
Well, as an energy economist, I would like us to look at to have an historical perspective of energy. The first major source of energy is wood, what many people call firewood. From there, the world graduated into coal. When the world moved into coal, there was no exhaustion. It was not that the firewood in the world disappeared. No. True. There were several arguments against firewood that made the world to move into coal. There are still some people, their source of energy is firewood till today. Now, when we move into coal, there were several arguments against the coal, and that's the cost, so many other things that came around coal. Then the world moved from that to black oil. Now the world moved from that to gas. Now the world is moving to renewables. It does not mean that coal finished around the world. In fact, even the West, there are parts of the West that heavily rely on coal. True. Nigeria is relying on oil and gas. The West is, maybe not the West, the world is now telling us that, it's not clean enough. We need to start looking at other areas. We need to start looking at renewables. The question is, where do we have abundant resources when it comes to oil and gas especially? We have it more within Africa, some part of Africa, the Middle East, and some part of Europe, as well as America. So, but the world feels they have to hopelessly depend on the so-called second world, third world countries for some of this to happen. So, but my argument is, I don't see oil finishing 50 years. Even though the world may abandon oil as they did to coal, as they did to firewood, they may do that and try to expand. In fact, by 2050, oil will still dominate the energy sector. Oil and gas will still dominate. This is not research that comes from me, even from British Petroleum report. By 2050, it will still have significant influence. Yes, it will not have the kind of influence it has now. There will be some production in renewable energies. There will be increase in consumption of gas, but your PMS, your diesel, will still dominate homes and factories respectively. Because when you look at renewable energy, the ability to transfer it from one point to another, unlike when you can put your gas in cylinders, you can put your petrol in cylinder, your diesel in tanks, and move them from one point to another. We're still trying to find technology to see how we can make all of this happen. And you don't want to cover the whole space with your energies that make use of wind, as we have seen so many parts of Europe, especially in Germany. So we're still going to have some of those challenges. Trying to put a lot of things to say that this gain is not completely bad. That when so many parts of the world is saying goodbye to oil, we have seen so many organizations in Nigeria even closing, selling off some of their assets. Yes. What does that now mean that it will be goodbye? We have also seen, let me take the argument a little, maybe if I can take a detour. Yes. For so many international organizations selling their their pharmaceutical industry, some even whining, say they are not running business in Nigeria, including supermarket. Does that mean demand reduced in Nigeria? No. This is the challenge. Effectiveness of that demand. Ability to purchase. The purchasing power of the people have been affected by inflation. It has also been affected by devaluation of naira. Doing business in Nigeria, especially in the oil sector, how safe is that oil sector? How protected are the people? These are real arguments, because this approval for Nigeria means Nigeria go and readjust your territorial map. Yes. Nigeria map, in a matter of a month or years, depending on when government is serious about it, we now adjust from what we used to know it to what it will now be. To
accommodate the extended area, the new areas that has been approved for Nigeria as
for exclusive economic zone.
Yes, and I hear you and I sense and I get the optimism, as it's quite clear. But then. Are all of these benefits and promises, many that you've mentioned, are they not likely to remain mere prospects at best if programs and projects are not carried out meaningfully and perhaps sustainably? Remember, we're still battling the issue of sea piracy. We talk about illegal arms trafficking. We talk about terrorism. Let's not forget global climate change requirements and even pollution. How and when do we start an integrated development program that we can remain committed to sustainably over time, even as we embrace the potentials and prospects of this easy extension?
Well, the easy extension is good, like I said, but that good news will depend on us whether it will be mere news or the good will still be there.
Indeed.
The action of our government will likely tell whether this good news will be lasting or not. First, it means that those who don't mean well for us, those who have decided to make their action to be against the state, will now have a particular owner, a new owner as it is, to combat with the country. So more than ever before, security around the maritime sector becomes very much of interest, because the world is now saying, UN is saying, we know Nigeria owns this area now. Nigeria owns it. It therefore means that we need to be very careful about securing the line. Now, if you want to do oil and gas, or you want to go into developing the area around the sea, it means Nigeria needs to actually come and take control. All I've said is about production possibility. In economics, production possibility is different from production reality. It's different from economic reality. Production possibility curve, as is taught in elementary economics, it shows the potential and how far a country can grow, or what is expected in terms of growth of a country. For Nigeria, there is no doubt the production possibility of Nigeria is highly concave. It is huge. So it's a business we need to quickly make gain of, because the revenue that accrues to Nigeria oil and gas sector as well as maritime sector, they are huge. But the challenges are also there. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be having the money overnight. But I can tell you, if we are purposeful and determined, we will surely get
intentional. I mean, I read up issues on maritime spatial planning, and I see how some countries, plan over time, for how to harness their blue economy sustainably over sometimes, for 50 years, sometimes for 100 years. And I mean, I don't know, but I see plans for the immediate and plans for the future here in Nigeria. But I mean, how sustainable are these plans? That's what I wanted us to just throw up. But then, Paul, another key issue to note is how to, and you referenced it earlier, but then if we can just narrow down on that, is the how to curb and perhaps circumvent possible issues of overlapping claims with our neighbors. Of course, Nigeria's international boundaries include the one between Nigeria and Niger. There's one between there's one between Nigeria and Benin. Then the one between Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea. There's also Nigeria, Satomi and Principe, and let's not forget the one now we border Cameroon on the international seas as well. How and when? What do we do, or what do we deploy to perhaps circumvent and avoid potential disputes resulting from this extension of our EEZ?
It's acting now, acting immediately. The approval is still very fresh. I think Nigerian Navy, we need to act immediately to occupy the locations that have just been approved for
Occupy is sounding very military to me. Where is the place of diplomacy in all of this?
That is why I said it should occupy. It should go and show presence in the area. Now, you cannot do any meaningful business without security.
Indeed.
I give you an example. Nigerian federal government under President Buhari built rail track from Abuja, started with President Jonathan, then President Buhari concluded it, from Abuja to Kaduna. Some persons who are enemy of state attack the train. So it's loss of confidence and so on and so forth. Now, we're talking of another country, not even war within the country. It's important for our Navy to show presence before we start having all manner of resistance coming from our neighbor. Because I will tell you, whatever is good is what the entire world wants. Once we know that there is possibility of oil, there is possibility of running business across the marine area and extension, the exclusive economic zone given to Nigeria, somebody also has interest in this area. But if Nigeria leave it for too long and become nonchalant about it, I can tell you that it will mean that in the coming period, when Nigeria wants to go for it, then we still have some maybe legislation, some resistance to deal with. If we don't act today, we are telling ourselves that we are going to have challenges tomorrow. My advice to Mr. President, he has just created the Ministry of Marine and Blue Ocean Economy. He should direct his minister and his men to quickly take over that region, that territory, by show of presence of our naval officers, by show of presence of our marine police, and by show of presence of our men of civil defense. With these men being on ground, we would have at least show for some time for awareness of the global community to know that this approval have been taking full. I mean, Nigeria have taken full charge of the area that have been given to her as a country.
Showing presence, Paul. I mean, the Gulf of Guinea serves as a strategic trading route, and where there is high level of commercial maritime activities like fishing. One of the key benefits of this extension is that all ships now coming through the extended area must now come under Nigeria's authority. And we would also, Nigeria now, would also now be in control of all mineral exploitation and fishery resources. But you and I know that foreigners have been having their way for some time in some of these waters, neighboring Nigeria, even the ones within Nigeria, with little repercussions for doing their sweep of the Nigerian waters. When you say show presence, doesn't this extension increase our security responsibilities along that route?
Exactly what I meant. exactly what I meant by security presence, beyond just being present. When a military person takes over an environment, it's not just for the sake of being there. It's also to ensure the essence of government, which is protection of life and property. The water is part of land in economies. The air you breathe is part of land in economies. Rocks are all part of land in economies. All natural resources are classified as land in economy. So that part of land, speaking economically, that belongs to Nigeria must be protected by the military, the police, and civil defense, so that even those have been carrying out illicit economic activities to area that previously belonged to Nigeria, and this extension for Nigeria, they can curb the activity, and it can truly be under the Federal Republic. I'm the president of Nigeria. We know that the area is governing is now beyond where it used to be. It includes this extension. And as a matter of symbol, I think even the minister should go to that area to show that Nigeria has now taken charge of this. And if there are illicit activity or even legal activity that is passing there, the ship coming there should come and understand that they are now within the Nigeria territory, and all fees, charges payable should go straight to the covers of Nigerian government. This will be more revenue for us, and of course the growth of our inflows and our economy at large. And if this sustains over years, it may also affect positively our development as a nation.
Talking about enforcement and showing presence, earlier on I talked about the maritime spatial planning. What do you have to say about carrying out enforcement, or enforcement of regulations, perhaps, but especially with advanced technologies, perhaps, within international laws as well?
Well, spatial planning is very important, and it's very essential for country that means well. What I don't know, what I have not seen, is the blueprint of the spatial arrangement of Nigeria in the next 50 years.
Yes, and I get that. I was actually, because if I'm not mistaken, I know that since this approval was granted by the United Nations, one of the first things that came to fore was the need to monitor these extended areas and using and deploying satellites, for instance. And that is exactly what I mean. I mean, it will be shocking if that is not already in place, but if not, shouldn't it be at this point in time?
Well, if that is in place, then you wonder how people can be freely kidnapped in some area in Nigeria that are even interland, not along the waterways. So if Nigeria is deploying, then you know that we need to do more in terms of our security response. That is why showing presence is very key.
Very key.
And beyond showing presence, I think Nigeria maritime sector needs to come up with a broad plan, minimum 20 years plan, and showing timelines as to what government will do, what private sector will do, and what will be the outcome for both the private sector and government. And I think this is so very urgent for us to not just have an extension for the sake of drawing a new map, but for us to have more revenue, improve engagement and employment, more economic activity, and also to become more productive nation among our sister nations within the West Africa sub-region.
This is something we will, it's just happened that only in December the announcement was made. So I want to believe that the government is already, there are things and plans already in the works.
Absolutely.
Towards some of these objectives and plans that you've mentioned. I'd like to thank you so much. Paul Alaje, Chief Economist, SPM Professionals, I'd like to thank you so very much for coming on Inside. Your thoughts on this subject matter are quite profound. Thank you so much indeed for coming on our program.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Moving on, I would like to shift the conversation over to how Nigeria is handling the issue of NTDs and the challenges that continue to inhibit full victory in the crusade against NTDs here in the country. As a matter of fact, the World Neglected, or rather the World Neglected Tropical Diseases Day, or better still, let me just say the NTD Day, is marked January 30 every year to celebrate achievements made in the campaign against neglected tropical diseases around the world. It is also used as an occasion to rally support for the campaign in areas where progress is either slow or where efforts are required for sustainability of the successes achieved, depending on where and what area. But to discuss some of Nigeria's efforts, let me bring in NTD coordinator, that is the NTD coordinator at the Federal Ministry of Health, Dr. Fatai Oyediran. Dr. Oyediran, thank you for coming on our program. I'm glad to have you here on this occasion.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So, I hear a large share of the NTDs recognized by the World Health Organization and WHO have their abode here in Nigeria. I don't know why that is the case, but you will tell us whether it is trachoma, buruli ulcer, or dengue fever, or even the one they call there's a medical term for it, but I know the more popular way they call it is elephantiasis. I need you to talk to me about how some of these or most of these NTDs have the potential to significantly reduce national productivity while increasing dependency ratio, especially among adults, and how they generally impede economic growth in the country. Not so much, but just a cursory idea as well of what is being done as mitigative and preventive measures here in Nigeria before we move on to other aspects of this issue.
Thank you. First, let me start by defining what NTDs are. The neglected tropical diseases are a group of 20 diseases that connect poor or poverty. These diseases are found in environment where poor people live largely, especially the tropical region of Africa, and particularly in area where sanitation is poor, potable water is lacking, there is substandard or no health care facility to cater for them, and a lot of these contributed largely to area where these NTDs are very common. And when you look at it globally, about 1.7 billion people are affected. But in Nigeria, we have about 120 million at risk of this disease. The implication is 1 out of 3 Nigerians has 1 or 2 NTDs affecting them. And in Nigeria, we have about 13 of these diseases, which we are
so if it counts between myself, you, and the cameraman opposite me now, it's possible that one of us is suffering from NTD.
Most likely, because you know, when I mention the names, you may be able to appreciate. Like in your intro, you said
I mentioned just a few of them.
Yes, some of these NTDs include onchocerciasis. We can term it down for the level of understanding to refer blindness.
Oh, the
elephantiasis is the common language for those with huge leg or hand or breast. So in NTDs we call it lymphatic filariasis. Then we also have schistosomiasis. Schisto is a disease where children urinate blood. In some other language they call it bilharzia. And we also have STH, soil transmitted helminths. This is what we call the snail fever.
Okay.
Then you come to trachoma, which is blindness disease. So these ones that I've mentioned are generally known as preventive chemotherapy NTDs. By that I mean those NTDs that we can use medicine to prevent them from spreading or in treating them. The second category of neglected tropical diseases are what we term innovative disease management NTDs or case management NTDs. This includes snake bite, rabies, yaws, buruli ulcer, leprosy, dengue, chagas, and so on and so forth.
I understand there's a group of 17 or between 17 and 20 of
yes.
them.
So, and of late, WHO has included NOMA, disease that spread the jaws, the nose, where you see the teeth coming out of nose, as a member of NTD family. That was last year, 2023. So, implication is that in Nigeria we are battling about 14 of these neglected tropical diseases.
What does that mean in terms of economic impact? And increasing, like I said, increasing the dependency ratio in Nigeria.
Thank you. NTDs generally affect the social well-being of Nigerians. Aside that, it has economic implication. Before moving ahead, I want to put it on record that NTDs affect the achievement of universal health coverage.
Okay.
And the attainment of SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, particularly SDG 3.
Okay.
Because of the poverty connotation it portends. If
Now
somebody,
poverty.
yes, poverty. Because if somebody is affected by elephantiasis or lymphatic filariasis or trachoma, you cannot go to work. As a teacher, you can no longer teach. As a farmer, you can no longer farm. Somebody that is bitten by snake or rabies will be bedridden for a while to receive treatment. So this has economic impact.
Yes.
And you bring it down, you will not be able to go and fend for the family to be able to feed them, talk less of getting accommodation for them.
And that is totally true.
Additionally,
yes,
if you are a student, because there is no dichotomy about what's the level of people or the category of people that could be affected by NTDs. If children are affected, they won't be able to go to school to acquire education. So perpetually, it keeps the poverty circle being circulated.
Again, poverty.
Yeah.
And you know, like you said, it does not select whether, it does not select from the young boy to the young, from the child, you know, to the young adults or to the full-blown adults. It does not differentiate.
Exactly.
But it appears to differentiate when you look at the social strata. And Doc, I am intrigued, rather intrigued by the irony of the whole situation, because NTDs, by nomenclature, is basically deemed as such. I mean, not because awareness is extremely low, but because countries like Nigeria, you know, where there are still prevalent, provide minimal funding for their management. So you mentioned poverty. In the course of speaking, you mentioned poverty more than, if I'm not mistaken, almost 6 or 7 times. So poverty remains an issue. So also is our national approach to standard healthcare. Is it that, Doc, do I just say, or do we just say that NTDs are just here because we probably want them to be here, and that NTDs are just for poor people alone, poor families, poor persons, people who do not have money? Because it will seem like they are the dominant victims here.
Thank you. No government all over the world will want to perpetuate its citizens under poverty. And the current administration of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in his 8-point agenda, lay emphasis on poverty reduction or eradication. So, and that is being shared by the coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Professor Muhammad Ali Pate, and the Honorable Minister of State, as well as my Permanent Secretary, Daju Kacholom, MNI. So all of us, the directors and program managers in health, are well informed about this agenda of the current administration, and we are doing all within our powers to ensure that poverty is reduced drastically, if not totally eradicated. So to answer your question, we are not perpetuating poverty within a particular strata of the society in Nigeria. Rather, government is trying its best to ensure that everybody live well above poverty. And this could be seen in the intervention strategies that we have put in place to address the needs.
Talk to us about some of them.
Of these NTDs. One, government provides medicine of choice for each of these category of diseases. And we give this drug free of charge.
Okay.
And when you quantify the amount of these drugs, it's run into millions and trillions. Even though substantial amount of these drugs are being donated by our partners. And aside that, governments every year vote amount of money to procure some drugs of choice to also treat some of these neglected tropical disease like anti-rabies vaccine, anti-snake venom drugs, which we also distribute free of charge to Nigerian citizens. And I also make bold to say that Nigeria is the only country in Africa, if not globally, that distributes this medicine free of charge to their citizens. When you go to Senegal, Togo, Gabon, the cost of this medicine is so high, even though it's high in Nigeria too, but they cannot afford to give it free of charge to the citizens, which Nigerian governments are doing. So when you treat them, they get well, they go back to their work. The farmer go back to the farm to farm, bring up their products, sell, and from there they get money. Okay. If somebody is bitten by a dog, which we call rabies, if it's not rabies at that point in time, government provides anti-rabies vaccine to treat, and that also make them to get better. So you can see that government is really trying to make sure that the citizenry get well and not to perpetuate them in abject poverty.
Let's talk a bit about the social impact of NTDs, the associated stigma, and the mental health angle. How exactly has all of that spurred us into action here in Nigeria, and what kind of actions are we talking about or looking at here, especially with regards to some of this social impact? Take stigmatization, for instance.
Thank you. This is one of the reasons why we said NTDs is affecting the achievement of universal health coverage and SDG 3. The reason being that either one or two of these diseases, after somebody has been infected or affected, after being treated or not being treated, it has some disability that one is left with. For instance, if you have elephantiasis, that's lymphatic filariasis, you have that swollen leg, we've seen instances whereby the husband left the wife because of that and left the house for the wife. That means she has been isolated and rejected. We've had instances whereby somebody that was bitten by a snake and the leg was amputated, it's either the husband left or the wife left him. So these are some of the disability connotation that this disease bring up and left, which the victim had to contend with over the years. So this social problem is one aspect of NTD's strategies that we look at. For elephantiasis, if somebody is affected, we have a strategies of MMDP.
Okay. What is that, MMDP? That's an acronym, I figure.
Yes, it's an acronym. Morbidity Management, Disease Prevention.
Okay.
So what we do there is to manage the effect, the social effect that NTD left with that kind of individual, so that we will be able to manage his life, and the problem will not be too much for him or her to bear. So another aspect that is left, all NTDs, when you are affected, you have that feeling of mental health. Because if you are isolated, if you are rejected, people don't want to move closer to you. Your husband wants to leave you, your wife wants to leave you. It has a traumatic effect on those individuals. And those are the things that we feel that NTDs as a program should look at to ameliorate or alleviate the suffering of Nigerians. And that is the more reason why, while we are developing or reviewing our NTD master plan,
Okay.
last year, 2020, which was launched during the World NTD Day of last year, January 2023, we included an aspect that facilitates or included the integration of mental health into the management of NTDs. So as we speak, we work hand in hand with the mental health program in the Ministry of Health. We also work in an integrated manner with malaria, National Malaria Elimination Program, because the mosquito that causes elephantiasis also causes malaria. So if we have that integration, it will lead to cost effectiveness in managing diseases, and government will be able to save some funding to be channeled to cater for more people rather than duplicating efforts.
Doc, we're out of time. If it's possible for you in 60 seconds, very quickly, you talked about cost benefits earlier. I would like for us to just land on that note in terms of, gauging national cost impacts now. As we prospect towards a Nigeria free from NTDs, is that even possible? I mean, because we've linked it now to poverty. What it also means is that poverty has to go for NTDs to go. But nonetheless, as we prospect towards a Nigeria free of NTDs, in terms of cost-benefit analysis and making, coming up or evolving an integrated, program, what do you see and what should we essentially have on ground in terms of structure, and long-term, in terms of structure that would help us with long-term returns, when we, for instance, invest hugely on eradication programs for NTDs in Nigeria?
Thank you. It's good to note that investment in NTDs is very critical at this stage.
Okay.
If we must meet the WHO target of elimination by the year 2030, even as much as the government is trying its best to invest in NTD, more needs to be done because the funding available to fight this menace is inadequate. And one of the resolution of Kigali Declaration is for country ownership to take place in order to ensure sustainability. So presently, most of our activity is being donor-driven.
Okay.
Being supported by NGDO partners.
When that dries up, what happens?
That's exactly why we are going. I'm happy to say that government is improving budgetary provision, is changing from the initial landscape we had, and we also want to appeal for more funding. And what we are trying to do as a program now is to go for domestic resource mobilization.
Okay.
The Dangotes, the Otedolas, the Adenugas, the Absama Rabius.
Good.
Those are the peoples we are targeting, and very soon, maybe in the next, before the next quarter, we are going to organize a resource mobilization summit.
That will be
driven by
really
government.
Good. We would also be monitoring that and see how you go about it, and also gauge the results, of some of these moves that you will be making.
Thank you.
Dr. Fatai Oyediran, NTD Coordinator, Federal Ministry of Health, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the program, and I'd like to wish you and your colleagues at the ministry, very good luck, and wish you well, and hope that you continue to push this campaign against NTDs in Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on Insight.
Thank you, and I wish you well.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth from Moru is up next.
Monitoring the budget is important to ensure that the financial, operational and capital plans that were developed and approved for implementation as part of the budget processes are being implemented. This is important in order to enforce accountability related to spending. Budget implementation also involves the process of how funds are actually spent to implement policies and projects captured. Since implementation is key, what should be the role of civil society organizations? I'll focus on this segment and my guest, Kunle Yusuf, Director General, Civil Society Organizations on Community Advancement and Humanitarian Empowerment Initiative in Nigeria, who joins us via Zoom, will speak to us. Mr. Yusuf, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much. Let's begin with your assessment of the budget, 28.7 trillion. Let's have your take.
Every year, day in and out, there is always an appropriated budget for the nation. But this time around, because the president promised Nigeria a renewed hope agenda, we hope that this budget will reflect that agenda of Mr. President. And of course, the budget has been passed. It is now left for the civil society organization at all levels to assess the implementation of the budget, evaluate the program from inception, monitor the process, and appropriately report to Nigeria from civil society perspectives on how the budget implementation 2024 will go. At the moment, we have set up a committee and the strategy to be adopted, and we will be working with all the government officers, departments, ministry, both in the executive arm of the government and the National Assembly. You know, in the National Assembly, there are two most important committees that, as far as the budget is concerned, you will be talking about the Public Accounts Committee and, of course, the Procurement Committee, both in the House of Rep and in the Senate. Now, the strategy first is to work with all the ministry agencies on the Procurement Act. All right? This time around, the civil society will be part of the process, the first process from the tendering of submission to tender for a project, which is the first line of the protocol by law that every contractor, consultant must bid for a job. That process must be very transparent. That process must follow the Procurement Act. That process must follow the BPP. So this time around, the civil society have decided to work with all the relevant agencies as far as that exercise is concerned. And after that, the award of contract in the process, once the contract is awarded, we will now also work with the monitoring team of the government.
Talking about public spending, public spending in priority sectors, including infrastructure, health, education, and social investment, quite set to be low and below the required spending to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal targets, and this in this critical sector before 2030. How achievable is this goal?
Well, we have access to 17,000 registered various civil society organizations. And out of these 17,000, close to 3,000 various registered NGOs are working and aligning with sustainable development goals. It is not a rocket science to identify when a system is completely aligned with sustainable development agenda, which is also a global agenda 2030. And at the moment, Nigeria is not the only country that will rank below the radar in terms of achieving SDG 2030. Before COVID, right, The whole world is struggling and working towards achieving 2030, but the COVID has actually affected so many indices and indicators and apparatus that we use to measure SDG performance, which Nigeria is also included. But presently, if you look at the area of education, UNESCO actually has 22% of our budget on education to be spent on education. Most of the states are working towards that. Oyo State, Ebonyi State, Edo State. Some of the states have achieved that logically and reasonably. But as far as the federal government is concerned, I think we still need a lot more of advocacy for all the ministry, all the parastatal and the ministry to also align with Sustainable Development Goals program. The Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDG, they are trying their best. But most importantly, is for each ministry and the parastatals in the federal government to ask a focal person on sustainable development goals in their offices. So they will align their budget, the planning of the implementation of the budget 2024 in accordance with the principle and guideline of sustainable development goals. Until we do that, our rating may still be on the lower rate, on the lower side of the cadre.
I need your position and mechanisms to be adopted by CSOs to work with agencies to monitor implementation in MDAs.
Every ministry and parastatal of the government should have a focal person on SDG, right, to align all their implementation of the budget and the program in accordance with SDG.
Okay, Mr. Yusuf, quickly, let's talk about the most important sector for most Nigerians, the defense and security sector, which has the largest percentage of the budget. You know, and then over the years, this particular sector has always received the highest percentage of the budget. How do we improve on this sector?
Okay, thank you so much for this logical question. There is no way in the world, as of today, that you only win security problem through the combatant mechanism. At the moment, the global wage against the terrorism is being done by human security components. All right? As you are investing in buying the equipment to fight insurgency in Nigeria, we should now be thinking in investing on human capital investment, which is beyond, it's an unconventional way of solving the problem. If you invest appropriately on education, ICT, all right, you'll be able to solve the problem of radicalization and extremism. When you are able to solve the issue of radicalization and extremism, you get your intelligent gathering reporting right. Once you are able, there's a step into it. Now, as far as our security is concerned, they are trying their best, but they should also look into another means that will give us the architecturing and the engineering of security implementation as far as Nigeria is concerned. And the only option we have now is heavy investment on human capital security intelligence, building a relationship with the communal leader, building a technical relationship and administrative relationship with community development council. Get your intelligent gathering reporting right. That is the area the civil society will be very active. That is the area the civil society will be ready to partner with them. We should also now be diverting again in a furtherance to what we've been doing into human capital development security intelligence. We've studied the budget. We've categorized them based on the priority and the promise of the president. The next step we are trying to do is now to begin to identify which of the ministry parastatals that has the largest sum of this project and develop an administrative working relationship with those agencies.
Kunle Yusuf, Director General, Civil Society Organizations on Community Advancement and Humanitarian Empowerment Initiative in Nigeria. We want to thank you so much for your thoughts on the issue before us. Thank you very much.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
And that's it on this episode of the program. We join us same time next week for more on Insights. My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.